The Asics MetaSpeed Sky Plus versus the Adidas Adios Pro 3. Which one is the better race day shoe? Let's compare and contrast and find out. So before we get into the video, make sure you like the video, subscribe to the channel. If you're already subscribed, watch this content. Thanks so much. I love you guys a lot. Make sure you follow me on Instagram and Strava for all sorts of other updates and things like that. So without further ado, let's begin. Specs for both shoes up here. And just sort of my precursor into this review. I've had to think about this one for a while. I had both shoes. I was thinking about comparing them. I just needed the appropriate metrics for both of them in order to get to that point, if you kind of understand where I'm going. So, for example, I had this shoe in March, not this exact model, but a previous model with the off-white color, and I ran it during the March Madness half marathon in Cary, Illinois. Back then, I was in a different shape, but the idea was, hey, the Vaporfly Next% 2 that I bought did not feel right. I need a race day shoe this week that I can adapt into. And this was a name that was thrown my direction multiple times, so again, I gave it a try. And this was like a shoe that I fell in love with almost immediately at that time. However, following this shoe's assessment, when we went out to Austin, Texas, and I wanted to get a serious running form assessment, the conclusion from that appointment was that my running form didn't require such a high offset and was actually a lot more average than I was thinking. It didn't require more stability. I didn't require more natural in my foot. I required something a little bit more in the middle because of how average my running form looked, right? As in, like, biologically, there was no mess, right? So the Asics MetaSpeed Sky Plus was the shoe that was recommended to me because, one, the 5mm offset to give it this more natural kind of strike, and I would benefit more from having a little bit of that pronation strike rather than having that outward tilt and kind of kicking out this way. So we're kind of getting into some of the specs as a result of that. We'll start with the Asics MetaSpeed Sky. 7.1 ounces in my shoe size with a heel of 39 and a forefoot of 35. However, I have my suspicions that the shoe has a negative offset in some sort of way because, again, when you look at it, when you lay it flat, it almost looks like the back is sinking more than the forefoot because of how fat the stack of FF Turbo foam is across the shoe. Is it possible? It could be. It also depends how you wear off the shoe over time. If you're walking in this thing, you know, could you sink the heel more and turn this offset a lot lower? Yeah, of course. And then again, we do have this carbon plate running the entire duration of the shoe. It's kind of sandwiched between the two FF Turbo stacks. We do have a nice rubber section for the shoe with an area in the center here that is exposed and as a result causes me some issues, especially when on my race day for the Crystal Lake Half Marathon in Crystal Lake, Illinois, when I use this shoe as my test metric, I was running on gravel and we cut up the rubber portion of the shoe a lot. Is it a big deal? Not necessarily at this time, but it's just something worth noting in this sort of review. And again, we have this nice mesh that's pretty translucent on the top, pays a homage to the Nike Vaporfly Next% 1 in my opinion, just with its translucence and its ability to hopefully filter out water from the shoe if you're running when it's raining, if you're sweating in your feet and you need some water to get flushed out. That's kind of my thoughts there, right? The jagged shoelaces are kind of a homage to, I guess, the Nike Alpha Fly. With these ridges, it's harder for the shoe to untie itself as you kind of go along. We do have the gusseted tongue. Honestly, besides the foam stack, the shoe looks very simple, and I think if you want to keep it nice and simple, this is a really appropriate shoe for your kind of race day scenario, right? So let's get on to the shoe that I had longer of the two, which is the Adidas Adios Pro 3. Again, now this shoe is at about 8.1 ounces with a heel of 39 and a half, depending on where you're looking, 33 in the forefoot, giving it a 6.5mm offset. So just about a meter and a half, or millimeter extra, I would say, raise, and also supination for this particular model, which is this a major life and death kind of scenario for your running? Not necessarily. It is going to be noticeable depending on what's going on. Like if we had a MetaSpeed Sky with the exact same specs and the same sort of design, it might not be as noticeable, but there's a couple of other things with this shoe going on that would make this thing noticeable, right? So When we look at the foam, we do have Light Strike Pro pretty much going the duration of the shoe, and instead of using a carbon plate, the carbon plate of the shoe is actually these plastic sort of fiberglass combination of energy rods that go through the shoe, right? The plastic is what's kind of surfacing the outside, and then the fiberglass is sort of that reinforcement on the inside of these pieces, and you have them kind of built out like, I guess, a claw. There's like 3 or 4 pieces that kind of run across the toe box area, and they're also sort of on the side here of the shoe, as you can see. So we also have some Continental rubber, a really thin coat, just so it doesn't wear or it doesn't add additional weight to the shoe, because again, like Formula 1 cars, the paint might weigh too much. In this case, too much foam will make the shoe weigh a lot more noticeable in this piece, right? So in that case, that's kind of what we're working with. We got this gap in the shoe to also help reduce some weight. And the purpose of this gap would be also that if it does feel super awkward while you're running and you're over supinating, then you may need a shoe with a higher offset or higher, I guess, stack offset in this case, just to off balance that. So anyways, that's what we got there. The outsole resembles, again, this is a tougher mesh. It resembles more of the Boston 11, which was one of the predecessor Daily Trainer models for this shoe, which was a shoe that was pretty tight, streamlined, but when you laced it up and you were ready to go on your daily run, you felt fast, you felt smooth, and that's something that I think this shoe pays homage to, was that sort of feel that the shoe provided. And the Boston 11 is also a half marathon friendly shoe as far as I was aware, so for this to be like the race day version of the shoe, you would think that this shoe will help you get through that distance, and it does fairly well from my experience with this particular case, right? And again, we do have a cool shoelace pattern. We have a nice lockdown in the forefoot area with this textile piece that's holding the front laces down. And then we do have, again, a gusseted tongue running across the shoe. And we have a bit of a heel cup here, which will sometimes cause chafing and cutting depending on what kind of socks you wear. So that's kind of important with this shoe. Don't have too thin of a sock. Have something with a little bit of guard on your heel, in my personal experience. So now that we covered all the general basics and we've kind of compared the two on that level, which one is the better daily, I guess, daily trainer, and which one's the better racer, right? We could answer both questions, and as I do in most of these videos, it really does depend. Why does it depend? Because your running form matters in this comparison, as I'm the personal experience and the guinea pig for this experiment, okay? So when I was running the March Madness half marathon in early March, in this particular shoe, I did complete the half marathon in about like an hour 33, 34. It was not a fast half marathon by any stretch, nor was the course. There was a lot of hills. I was not in the perfect shape for a half marathon, but I got through it, and by the end of the race, you know, both my calves have cramped up so bad, I was just like, man, I'm so done with this. If we had another mile in this race, there was just no way I would be able to finish. So that being said, the shoe was also taken on some 10K runs, not in the in just recent past, I guess you could say. I did this for the Lincoln Park Lincoln Park 10K for the zoo race out there in June. I did this during the Mega Mile 10K just like a few weeks back, and I had a lot of comfort in this shoe. It was just a smooth sailing piece, and I really liked it for those shorter distances. And for the half marathon, it's hangs in there really well. It's just, again, it's kind of course contingent what you use it for. So if it was like a flat course like the Chicago Marathon, I imagine I would have a good time with this if I had to lace it up today to run with it during the Chicago Marathon. Would it be the fastest shoe I've ever run in? Not by a long shot, but would it be comfortable enough to get me from point A to point B of the marathon? Most likely. So the reason we bring that up is because the MetaSpeed Sky, I've talked about this before, how this is not like a beginner level race day shoe, right? The specs of the shoe with this 5mm offset and potentially having this negative offset sensation in the shoe requires a lot of practice and a lot of building of the muscles and tendon strength in your feet, in your ankles, in your glutes, just the entire running mechanism on your body in order to understand what this shoe's intent is, right? Because this shoe is meant to have like a quick turnover. It's meant to be kind of a flat, low riding kind of shoe, not with a lot of bounce, but with a lot of consistency across your entire run. And why this is such an expert level thing is because during the Crystal Lake half marathon, when I was running with this thing, I finished in like just under an hour 29 like minutes. So I was 5 minutes faster in the MetaSpeed Sky. I was more consistent with the shoe, but the problem here was I developed massive blisters on my right foot in my toe box area, particularly on the big thumb of my foot. So in this shoe, because I was pronating a lot more, because the shoe encouraged that pronation, my body and my running form was not used to that particular running style, just because I was running in shoes with that higher offset that encouraged me to strike on the outside a little bit more, rather than the shoe that encouraged me to strike more on the inside. And as a result, two different things happened, right? Where my typical strike point was like here in the forefoot and here on the outside, that area lowered back closer to the midfoot area of my foot, like over here. And as a result, in my left foot, I had a tremendous amount of like tingling sensation behind the ball of my foot, okay? And that's just because, again, the shoe's placement and its offset for this particular model kind of go back and encourage you to have more of that midfoot strike. So if you've been striking with the ball of your foot more often than not, you're going to feel the change in the running form, okay? So that becomes a question of like, do you keep on running with the current running form do you have, or do you try to double back a little bit and try to adapt to what is considered the more natural running form? And that's where I talk about this skill set piece of like the MetaSpeed Sky Plus being a shoe that in my opinion is probably faster than the Adios Pro 3, but requires a lot more practice and a lot more time on feet in order to understand how to maximize this shoe. And we're not even going to get into like the MetaSpeed Sky Paris, just because I haven't put any runs in that shoe. I don't own it yet, but again, people are saying that that's like the shoe that's the upgraded version of this, which I'm really skeptical of, depending on what the upgrades are. But again, in comparison with these two, I would say if you're a long-term experienced runner with a fairly average to really great running form, the MetaSpeed Sky should be your choice. Now, if you're a runner that is still kind of developing your speed, you were a fan of the Vaporfly Next Percent or the Alphafly series shoes. Let me walk that back, actually. If you're a fan of the Vaporfly series shoes, you're going to like this one a little bit more, right? It's a lot more forgiving if you have some stability issues while you run. It's going to be streamlined, it's going to be tight, it's going to be a nice fit for your foot, but it's not as crazy of a tier of shoe as the Asics MetaSpeed Sky is. That being said, because you are using these plastic, nylon, fiberglass rods in the shoe, you're going to have that different sensation, maybe not as much oomph as a full carbon plate in like the MetaSpeed Sky Plus. So those are just some of my thoughts there. Overall, I like both shoes. It was very hard for me to decide here in the year 2024 which one would be the better shoe. I was trying to take this one and build myself up to it for the Chicago Marathon, but I'm currently not sure if, based on my Crystal Lake half marathon performance, if I'm ready for this piece yet. If I had to go to the Adios Pro 3, I would be accepting of it, just not this particular model, because this one's just about ready to retire before the race. And I would have to assume the condition that I will not be running anywhere close to a sub 3 in this particular shoe, right? There's a lot of other factors that are involved with that. It's just this shoe will not be a positive or a net positive leaning factor into the race. It'll be neutral at best, I think. So between these two, both really great shoes, both really great kind of daily racers in your lineup. It just really comes down to your running form, your biomechanics. Do you have, like femoral anti-version that would allow you to better be suited in a pronation style shoe, or do you need something with a little bit more stability, and as a result you go for the Adios Pro 3, right? That 1.5 millimeters matters in these particular race day shoes in a longer run, because you're going to feel more and more of those steps as you go along. So that's just me, putting in my 2 cents on that. But again, if you agree or disagree with the assessment, or you like one shoe more than the other, give me a reason why in the comments below. I'd love to know what your guys' thoughts are, if I'm kind of landing this on the money, if my running experience has kind of been the same as yours. But yeah, I think we'll just leave it at that. And yeah, it's been fun with these 2 daily trainers. There's still a little bit of life in them to go. before the Chicago Marathon in less than 3 weeks. So which one we're going to go with is still kind of up in the air, whether it's either one of these to begin with. So we'll kind of see as we get there. So thanks again for watching. I'll see you guys in the next one.